Welcome back. We left off on James being kidnapped for the second time, and me about ready to get convicted on a felony case of conspiracy to manufacture a controlled substance, which resulted in blowing up a house. So they let his mom out early. She gets James and splits. I end up going to court for the next, I think it was 6 to 8 months by the time everything was wrapped up. We take it all the way to trial. I'm almost certain I'm not going to get convicted. I'm on a conspiracy, which means I'm not the key defendant. Their key witness could not identify me in the courtroom. She described me as a 6 foot tall, Middle Eastern swarthy individual. And it's not the case. But I digress. I ended up getting convicted on conspiracy to manufacture. So they sentenced me to, it was 3 years. It was a 3 to 5. And they gave me 3. Arrested immediately at sentencing. Taken to the county jail. And I'd already served almost a year. I think you're right. It was like 11 months and 29 days, something like that. So I'm in county jail for quite a long time. I think we were in county jail almost 3 months waiting for transfer to state. And in that time, I really got to see the true colors of my co-defendant. He couldn't do time to save his life. I mean, it was ridiculous. Psych meds, suicide watch, crying. I knew.
He was a complete emotional wreck.
A wreck, yeah. So they don't ever tell you that you're up for transport. They just come get you. So they load this all up. There's a guy that was going to prison with us for not paying child support. So he had to go to prison for a year flat for not paying child support, which I thought was way out. Whatever. So we all ended up going to Susanville to the reception. And when you get to reception, you're on a 90-day no movement. No books, no TV, shower, try to remember, maybe twice a week, something like that. And we did get yard, but it wasn't an everyday thing. It wasn't an everyday thing. Basically, reception is to see how you're going to react during time, where you're going to go, based on your points and availability of cells, wherever they're going to send you. And my cellie at the time was this weird kid from Shasta County. I forget what he was in there on. Burglary or something. But he was a cutter. And he had scars like all over him. His neck, his arms, his legs. All he did was eat psych meds and sleep all day. It was
Doesn't sound fun.
stone cold creep. He just creeped me out. Wouldn't work out. Not that there's any mandatory workouts in reception, but I mean, it's for your own mental health.
Yeah, you should do something.
Should move. Should do something. Yeah, it was a trip. That part of prison was a trip. Yeah. So then he gets shipped out, and somehow I move in with Scott. And that's when everything kind of unfolded with Scott and him being a rat. Even though there was no paperwork, one of the guys that he had testified on in Oakland back in the day was there, and he was black. So when it all came to a head, I told him he's got to go. So he rolled it up and they sent him to Avenel. So he leaves, and not too long after that, they take me over to High Desert, which is across the street. And my first cellie, they take me over there about 2 o'clock in the morning, walk to the yard, the fog's all set in. All the yard lights are on. It was really ominous. It was a trip. They take me into this building 3, and take me upstairs. Pop the door, and I look in there, and I mean, I'm big. I'm 6'4", 350 at the time. And this dude's bigger than me. Like, it looks like a water buffalo laying on his fucking bunk, right? Oh, fuck, hey. So he tells me, he's like, hey, we'll check paperwork in the morning. Just go ahead and take a nap. I'll see you at breakfast, right? Mm-hmm. So I wake up in the morning, get down. He's already awake, making coffee. His paperwork's out on the table. And he asked me to put my paperwork down there. So I put my paperwork down. Reading it. Introduced himself. His name was Big Art. Big Art was 6'7", 440 pounds. You know? So it's a big ass cat, you know. So he reads my paperwork. Everything's fine. Everything checks out. His paperwork is like this. Flipping the page, flipping the page, flipping the page, flipping the page. All his paperwork checked out. He was a lifer in there on the 3rd strike. Now his story is a story of parents that probably should never have been parents. His dad was an alcoholic that left his mother. He would come and go as he pleased, you know? Mm-hmm. And she had 5 kids. Big Art was one of the youngest of the 5. And him and I got to be really close. We did. We got to be really close. He could sing like nobody else. I mean, he had a great voice. He could sing. And totally not the personality you would think, you know?
Yeah.
Anyhow, every morning he would get up and write letters to his mom. Every morning. So we're talking, and he's telling me a story, and basically, his mom had 5 kids. Art was young and angry, 10 years old at the time this happened. His mom had one of those great big 1970 style station wagons, and he's riding in the front seat. And she pulls up to the stop sign. Art, my legs are cold. Can you get in the back of the station wagon and get my Afghan? Well, he can't crawl the 3 seats back to get it. He gets out of the car to get to the back of the station wagon, and she speeds off. She left him at a juvenile detention center. It's not an orphanage like you would think it's an orphanage, but it's where kids get in trouble. It's a detention center, but back then I think they called them orphanages. There's kind of like that, you know. So they take Art in as a what they call it. I don't want to say a deserted child, but I think it's what they call them, deserted child. So from the time he was 10 till the time he was 18, because nobody would claim him, he grew up in this detention center. Getting beat up by older boys, sexually assaulted by older boys. Once that happened, that really turned him mean, and Big Art became violent. So when he got out at 18, his mom picked him up. Now, he wasn't welcome to stay with her. He had to go out on his own. Now, mind you, here he is at 18 years old. No trade, no crafts, no education. What's he gonna do?
Yeah.
What's he gonna do? So it don't take long for him to end right back up into jail. And that's his life story from the time he's 18 until the time I met him. And as he's telling me this story, he says, "Graham, check it out. My home is prison. I don't know how to interact out there. I don't know how not to be talked in a respectful manner. I don't know how to figure out 40-hour a week, taxes." Because every time I would get out, I would get a job and find an old lady and get a trailer and do the best that I could. But inevitably, somebody would call me a motherfucker or disrespect me on the job or whatever the case may be, and I would be right back in prison. So the last time that he was out, he had a daughter and couldn't do it. Drinking, getting fired. Now, I'm going to interject. At some point, you have to learn how to be responsible. Okay? And I don't know if he could ever. The emotional damage of that kind of abandonment. He had no self-worth whatsoever. His father didn't want him. His mother didn't want him. So he knew that he was a worse influence on his daughter if he was there compared to if he was gone. Was his reasoning for what he did. He went out, stole a car, and was just driving around town. Case of beer and a stolen car. Until he got pulled over. Got in a fight with a cop. Got arrested. He already had 2 strikes in California. So they offered him a plea deal. I think it was a 12-year term. And they would have dropped the assault on the officer. He refused to take the deal. He took it all the way to trial. On purpose. To lose on purpose. To go back to prison for life on purpose. So, here we are, high desert, 6 o'clock in the morning, and he's writing a letter to his mother. The one that caused all of this. And I asked him, how? How do you do this? He goes, I forgive her. She couldn't handle the load that she had. And I was a handful. I forgive her for it. Does it hurt? Sure, it hurts, but I can't allow myself to be bitter over it. Especially in a prison cell.
Yeah.
Here he is, refuses to allow himself to be bitter at his mother for what she did. Which I was blown away. I didn't think Art had that kind of foresight, you know. Yeah, I'll never forget that day. That was a hell of a story when I first heard it, you know. But he was a great cellie. He sat around writing country music songs all night long, drinking coffee. Because Big Art was so comfortable being in prison, he didn't get mood all the time. Laughing, joking, cutting it up, good morning. And that annoys people in prison. People in prison are not in good moods, and they don't like motherfuckers who are in a good mood.
No, everybody's miserable.
Miserable. And misery loves company, especially prison. So, you know, he rubbed people the wrong way. I mean, it wasn't enough to get after him, you know? But he refused to be in a bad mood in prison. But he had done more time than two guys in there combined. You know? He had 10 years in the system before he was even 18.
So that's heavy to think about.
Yeah. Hey, he'd only been out maybe a combination of 5 years his whole life.
Wow.
And I met him, he was in his early 50s.
Oh, wow.
Old school convict. You know? So, Big Art gives me this speech. He goes, check it out, Hillbilly. Now, this is a lifer building, right? He goes, you're the youngest one in this building, and anything happens in this building, you're going to go take care of it. And I'm standing with my back to him, and I'm looking out our little glass window through the top tier, you know? I'm like, this motherfucker. So I turn and go, hey, check it out, man. I go, you're a lifer. I realize this is your home. I'm just passing through, bro. I got a kid to get home to. That's my goal. If you want to med check me and see if I can fight, we can just get down this fucking cell right now, Art. He sits back, fucking laughs. He's like, fuck, man. In almost 30 years doing time, I ain't never heard that fucking speech. He's like, I just wanted to make sure you were willing to fucking fight. I said, I'm always willing to fucking fight, Art. He goes, fucking don't worry about it. So the next morning, the shot caller for the building, his name was Samson, out of San Fernando Valley. Samson comes over and goes, hey, check this out. Big Art told me about the mud check. He goes, young man, he goes, you got nothing to worry about. Your head's screwed on straight. You're focused on your kid and your family. Get the fuck home. Any issues come up, don't just leave. Come talk to us. We'll straighten it out for you so you get the fuck out of here. So I never lost a day in prison. Minding my own fucking business. Every day, every minute of every situation. I didn't care. I mean, if my batteries are dead on my Walkman, my headphones are still in my fucking head. And I just stayed focused on getting home. Because there are situations in that you're not going home. You're not going home. You fuck up and do the wrong thing, you know? So I was blessed that I went to a lifer yard and I was around real convicts, real men that had done real fucking time. And they kind of kept a short leash on me and looked out for me, you know? It was a blessing for sure. For sure. But I couldn't stay in that building for very long because it is a lifer building. So they try to keep all the lifers in one building, and they shift everybody else around the other 3 buildings. So I ended up getting transferred. I think building 2, and that's where I met Gasner. Gasner, when I met him, what did he say he was on the phone the other day? How old?
In his 70s. He's pushing, I think he's in his 70s, pushing his 80s. I think is what he said.
So I met him when he was in his early 60s then, right?
Yeah, because it's been about
Been about
10, 15 years.
Yeah, 15 years, roughly. So, once again, I get in there with an old school convict that knows what time it is. And he was hell-bent on keeping my head focused. I mean, all we did was work out. We were on a lockdown for almost 3 months. And we bird bath, we didn't use the showers. But when we worked out in the cell, we had to build a dam with our towel by the front door because the sweat was so thick and that it would leak out onto the tier. We worked out nonstop. And I got really close with Gasner. I love him to this day. And he just got home after, what do you say, 35 years?
Something like that, yeah.
35 or 38 years. He just came home, just discharged parole, and is about to go on a road trip around the United States. But he was also on my ass. Stay away from them. Mind your own business over here. Don't pay attention to this. Here's the jobs you want. Here's the jobs you don't want. You know, I was very blessed to have him. I really was.
No, he's salt of the earth.
Yeah, salt of the earth. Old Marine, Vietnam Marine. One hell of a dude. So, that was my introduction to prison. I had to file for visitation. And sometimes it takes 2 to 3 months for visitation to clear. So I wasn't able to see you. Now I still had a pending custody case. And because I'm state property, it's up to the state to facilitate visitations. And I had a visitation scheduled with you. And a hearing. They had to take me from Susanville back down to Plymouth County, for that hearing and for my visitation with you. It was still behind glass, but they still had to make sure that happened. So that was the first time I had seen you in almost a year. The court went ahead and on that hearing granted that the supervised visitations continue, but no longer has to be with a social worker. It can now be with a family member, my mother or your grandparents on the other side of the fence. So that takes us into prison visitation. It still took 3 to 4 months for it to get okayed. And I think you were denied twice coming there.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I know you don't remember. The first time is because you were wearing blue jeans.
Oh, that I do remember.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
You were just a little tiny thing, and you had on a pair of blue jeans, and they turned you guys around at the gate. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I was pretty upset.
The second time the denial was my mother had a V-cut shirt on. And they denied her on that. There's 3 denials. The blue jeans, the V-cut shirt. Now, mind you, when I finally did get into visitation, there's all kinds of women in mini skirts, tits hanging out. I mean, making out with their old men, all kinds of shit going on. The third denial was she showed up, all of her paperwork was stapled together. Not allowed to have paperwork stapled together because the staple could be
A weapon.
or help get handcuffs undone or whatever. So there was 3 denials before I actually got to see you. So I think that's a good stopping point for right now. This prison story is going to be quite a bit longer than others. I'm not going to touch on anything as far as calling shots, popping knots, being some bad peckerwood on the yard. That's not what this is about. This is about the emotional stamina prison takes from you. And the stories that I met from other inmates, that were either a product of a toxic environment or created one themselves. That's what I think this prison story needs to be about. It doesn't need to, there's enough stories out there of everybody talking about how bad they were in prison and how much violence they've seen. That's irrelevant to me. This is about emotional stamina of being in prison. Thank you guys for joining us. Look out for part 2.